Hello, my sweet and precious students. I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome back. We're going to talk lesson 11 today, pre-algebra. You're my 8th graders. I just realized I have stuff on the wall behind me. Oh, it's over here. Whew. Okay, so my 8th graders, let's talk about this, my pre-algebra kids. Lesson 11, we're going to be talking about word problems. Okay, again with the ring light. Got to take these off. We're going to be talking about word problems with divisibility. It's word problems with equal groups. I'm on page 42, guys. If you're following along at home, I'm in the 3rd edition of Algebra 1/2 for Saxon. I'm on page 42, and in the first example, we're just going to launch right into this. That first example, I got to pause this and turn my fan on. Hold on. Okay, I love that light lights up my face, but man, let me tell you, it gets hot. So, okay, the first example, number 1, it says 42 students can ride on each bus. If there are 12 buses, how many students can go to the game? So actually, this isn't going to be necessarily a division. Equal groups are not always division. They can be multiplication, because the opposite or the inverse of multiplication is division, right? These two operations go hand in hand. So let's talk about that. 42 students can ride on each bus. If there are 12 buses, how many students can ride to the game? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There's 6 buses, and then we've got 6 more to give us a total of 12 buses. You don't have to draw this out every time. But if 42 students can ride on each bus, right? 42, 42, 42, you get the idea, right? 42, 42, 42, 42, 42, 42. We're going to do 42 12 times. That's just multiplication, right? So we're going to multiply, and this time when we multiply, we're going to do, so 42 times 12. We could do the old-fashioned way, but I like to do my box method, right? We get 40 times, or plus 2, and 10 plus 2 gives us 12. So this gives us 42, this gives us 12. We get 4 with 2 zeros, 2 with a 0, 8 with a 0, 2, and that's 4. 8 and 2 is 100, so that's 504. 504. All I did was just add those up, right? So 504 students, 504 students can ride. Let's look at example number 2. 42 students can ride on each bus. There are 1,264 students who want to go to the game. How many buses are needed to take all the students to the game? So this one, we want to be really careful. We don't want to multiply here. We're going to have a really big number. It's still an equal groups problem, because we need to put an equal number of students onto the buses. Now, before we did 42 times number of buses equals total students, right? That's what we did on the previous one. This one is going to be 42 times, do we know the number of buses that we need? No. Equals the total number of students, which is 1,264. Guys, if we multiply in this direction, we can divide in this direction. But I can already tell you with this guy in the middle, it's going to be a problem. So we're going to rewrite that. B times 42 equals 1,264. Multiply in this direction, divide in that direction. So our division problem is 1,264 divided by 42 equals B. So we got to do that. So 42, we have 1,264. All right, so I like to do, I'm going to erase this guy right here. And the good thing about lecturing online is that you can go back and rewind, right? So I'd like to do this. 42 times 2 is going to be 4 and 8, 84. 42 times 3 is going to be 6 and 126. And that's perfect. 4 times 3 is 126. So we're going to come back over here. This is going to be 3. 3 times 4 is 126. We subtract, we get 0. When we subtract, we bring down. 42 cannot go into 4, so we're going to put a 0 here. 0 times 42 is 42, or a 0. I don't know what I'm doing there. So we subtract, we get 4, and we would bring down, right? We would put a decimal here, and we bring down a 0. 42 does not go into that, but we don't need to do that. What we do know is that it's 42 with a remainder of 4 students. So guys, how many buses are going to be needed? Not just 30, we're going to need 31 buses. So we'll need 31 buses. Otherwise, those 4 kids are going to be left behind, okay? So be really careful about that. So 30 with a remainder of 4. Okay, So let me see if I can adjust this a little bit so that I'm not writing slanty. Okay, so, oh geez, I don't know what I'm doing. All right, guys. So y'all are patient. All right, so example number 3 on problem set, or I'm sorry, on page 43. We have 560 students will be as evenly divided as possible between 34 buses. How many students will ride on each bus? This is pretty easy because it says right in there, evenly divided. We're gonna be dividing. We're gonna take 560 students and divide them by 34 buses. That's gonna give us the number of buses, I'm sorry, not number of buses. We have 34 buses, right? It's the number of students per bus. All right, so 34, let me just make some adjustments here. Okay, so 34, we know that 34 times 1 is 34, right? And then we know 34 times 2 is gonna be 8, 68. 34 times 3 is gonna be 2, carry the 1, 102. 34 times, let's say, well, let's keep going. Actually, let's do this. So let's write it out. 34, and we've got 560 under our table. 34 goes into 56 one time and we do 1 times 34 is 34. We subtract, and when we subtract, we bring down, and this is where this is coming into helpful, right? So how many times does 34 go into 220? Let's keep doing this guy over here. 6, carry the 1, so that's 13, 136. Oh, nope, we got some more. 34 times 5, we got 0, 2, 15, 16, 17, 170. We got some more. 34 times 6, we get 4, 2, 18, 19, 20, 204. Let's try one more time just so we have it. 28, 21, 22, 23, 23. So it's not, so 34 goes into 220 6 times without going over. 6 times 34, we have it over here, is 204. When we subtract, that gives us a remainder of 16, right? A remainder of 16. Okay, so that means that now we have to figure all that out, right? We have 34 buses. 16 students are gonna go on all 34 buses are gonna have 16. But then we have all these 16 students that have to evenly be divided on those 34 buses. So we have 16 students on 30, so the way to think about this is there's 34 buses total. All of them are gonna have 16, right? But we're gonna minus. So if we do 34 minus 16, we end up with 18. So 17 students are gonna be on 18 buses. This is gonna be 16. Let's just double check our math here, okay? We've got 16 students, 6 and 8, right? That's gonna give us 24. That gives us 44 buses. Oh, we made a mistake here. So let's come back. All right, I'm gonna erase my work here so that I can be a little, I don't think I'm being very clear about this, so I'm gonna try again, right? So we have 16 students are gonna be on every single bus, right? So that means, but then we have 16 we have to divide up among 34, all right? So that means if we take 34 and we minus the 16, those 16 students, because these 16 are gonna be the buses, the answer here is gonna be the buses with 17 students, okay? So if we take a look on that, we have, so 16 students, so that gives us 8, right? We have 18 buses with, this will be 17 students. I think this is hard because it's 16 and 17 repeated. And then this one will be with 16 students, okay? Because, we're minusing 16, which is the remainder over here, okay? And that will give us our 18 buses. If this was ever on a test, you can just kind of guess and check, like flip your problems around to make sure you're getting the right number of students. This was a bad example, I'm sorry guys. So let's take a look at some of these practice problems. I think that will help, that'll be a little bit better. Let's look at A. Okay, so if you're following along at home, 43, what I would like you to do is on page 43, go ahead and do those practice problems that are A through C. A through C, okay? When you're done, so pause the video, do those practice problems. When you're done, come on back. So for A, 40 kids stood patiently in each line. 40 kids stood patiently in each line. There were 35 lines of kids. How many kids were standing patiently in line? So we have a bunch of lines, right? And there's 40 in each line. So we're gonna do students per line times number of lines equals total students. Okay, students per line. 40 kids stood patiently in each line. That's gonna go right here. Times the number of lines. There were 35 lines total. Perfect, that goes right here. That gives us our total number of students, okay? Now remember, when we're multiplying by groups of 10, what we can do is 35 times 4 gives us, carry the 2, is 12, 140, but we have that extra 0 here. Do you see that? On that 40, so it's 1,400 students total. Typically with word problems, it's a really good idea to write a sentence out. So it's asking us how many kids were standing patiently in line. 1,400 students stood in line. 1,400 students stood in line. All right, so for B, we have 40 kids could crawl into one space. If there were 1,600 kids, how many spaces would it take to hold them all? So if we have the number of students per space, right? We multiply that by the number of spaces, we get total number of students, total number of students. So let's go back and read our problem. 40 kids could crawl into one space. So number of students per space, 40. Times, if there were 1,600 kids total, right? How many spaces? So we don't know this. So we're gonna say S for spaces. Actually, I'm gonna make that an X. I try to avoid S because it looks like, or let's make it an M, I don't care. I just try to avoid an X or an S because it looks like a 5. So equals 1,600. Guys, with our variable in the middle, we gotta flip it around. So we're gonna do M times 40 equals 1,600. Multiply in this direction, we divide in that direction, which means we have 1,600 divided by 40, okay? 1,600 divided by 40. Notice I wrote it a little bit different here. Here's why. If you have a 0 on top and a 0 on bottom, you can divide both those by 10, and what you're doing is lobbing off those zeros. So I just made the problem a little bit easier for you. So now it's 4 divided by 160. 4 divided by 160. 4 goes into 16 4 times with no remainders. So it's gonna be 40 because 4 times 40 gives us 160. So our answer is 40. Now again, go back and read the problem. How many spaces could it take to hold them all? It takes 40 spaces. Okay, it takes 40 spaces to hold all those students. All right, so let's see about, all right, C. There were 148 kids that had to be crowded as evenly as possible into 8 spaces. How many kids were in each space? Okay, so number of kids per space, right, times number of spaces equals total number of kids. Total number of kids. All right, because we take our groups and we multiply them together, right? So there were 148 kids that had to be crowded as evenly as possible into 8 spaces. So the number of spaces, 8. Total number of kids, 148. What we don't know is the beginning here, okay? We multiply in this direction, we can divide in this direction, so really it's 148 divided by 8 equals number of kids per space, okay? So we do the math here. Oh, let me move my, you know what would help? Oh, look at this, fancy, woo! I'm learning what to do here. 8 divided by 148, 8 goes into 14 one time. 1 times 8 is 8. subtract, we get 6. When we subtract, we bring down 6. So 8 goes into 68, right? 8 times, because 8 times 8 is 64. So we get 18 with a remainder of 4. 18 with a remainder of 4. That means they fit into 18 spaces, but there were 4 of them that had to be distributed throughout those 18 spaces, right? So we take 18, that's the number of spaces. The number of spaces is 18, right? And we, those 4 students had to be dispersed through those 18, which means that, so minus 4 is going to give us 14. So 14 spaces held 18 kids. 14 spaces held 18 kids. 4 of those spaces held 19 kids because those had to be distributed out, right? So we know we have 18 spaces, and then if we did the math on that, we would end up with 148 kids. 148. That makes sense? Hopefully it does. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. I will try and adjust things so that I'm not writing in the screen here. But if you have any questions, like I said, go ahead and let me know, and we'll see you in class or see you on the next lesson. Thanks so much. I have no idea how to stop. Why isn't it stopping? Oh God, that's the funny part.